One thing is sure that I did not feel like coming back to Los Angeles to work there because I went through very difficult times just before that film. It must have been 4 years before. And that was the murder of Sharon Tate. So I really didn't want to work there anymore. I didn't want to come back. But I have friends there at the same time, namely Robert Evans, Jack Nicholson, and Bob Town. And they all wanted to do this film with me. So that was my state of mind at the time I was coming back.
Robert Town and I were roommates at some point, and he had this idea that we talked about, I don't know how long before he actually started writing it, to do a trilogy on Los Angeles. And the idea was to do a film, a trilogy, and wait the same number of years between them that passed in real time, that started in 1937 and end with the third film in 1953, the year that no-fault divorce went into effect in California.
There were a number of steps that brought me to Chinatown. One was, oddly enough, was a construction project that was going on up at my then house in Benedict Canyon. A developer had managed to fog through City Hall an outrageous project which was going to be moving 9 or 10 million yards of earth around and destroying the entire canyon. And I went down to City Hall and I saw how they worked, and the building superintendent actually said, "This project is so ill-advised that I'm going to approve it because it will never get through." I mean, you know, the most tortured logic imaginable. And then I was walking with an old friend of mine along the beach, the Palisades above the beach, and I suddenly felt like I was about 8 or 9 years old because all the smells that I remembered as a kid, eucalyptus and pepper and the ocean. And then I realized that because of the growth of the city, all those scents that you could catch anywhere in the city had sort of been banished to the farthest edges where there were only a few traces left of them. And then there was an article called Raymond Chandler's L.A. And in it, there were photographs of Los Angeles taken at that time, which was 1970, but meant to suggest the period of Raymond Chandler, late 20s into the 30s. And I thought, my God, it would still be possible to recreate the Los Angeles of that period, and all these other things were roiling up at me. Then I went to Eugene, Oregon with Jack, and he was directing Drive, he said, and he wanted me for some perverse reason to be in the film playing a teacher, so I did. And I checked out of the library up there a book called Southern California Country, An Island on the Land. And in it, there was a chapter called Water, Water, Water. And it was a real eye-opener. It was about the way that the city of Los Angeles basically stole the water of the Owens Valley and brought it to the San Fernando Valley, and then incorporated the valley into the city. So I took that kind of nostalgia that I felt. It was more than nostalgia, the pain of feeling a loss of those things that I loved so much in childhood. And then the reason for that loss, which was the cancerous growth of this place at the expense of beautiful surrounding areas, and put them together, and that was the beginning of Chinatown. Then there was one final component to the initial phase of it, and that was Hira, my dog. I had bought Hira from a Hungarian vice cop who was breeding these dogs. And we got to talking. I said, "Well, what do you do, Tony?" And he said, "Well, you know, I work in Chinatown." I said, doing what? He said, nothing. So wait a minute. You're working Vice in Chinatown and you're doing nothing? He said, oh yeah. I said, well, why is that? He said, that's what they tell us to do, is nothing. I said, why? He said, well, because the problem is that we can't get inside that culture. The dialects and the tongs we're just shut out. And so we really can't tell if something is going on, whether we're helping somebody commit a crime or preventing it. And that really stuck in my mind. I thought, what a great notion. And so I gave Gittes a background in Chinatown, where he did something and it didn't work out. Because then Chinatown as a notion begins to stand for the futility of good intentions. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a detective movie, not about those things that had traditionally been done in films, but do it about something that's in front of your face every day, like water and power. And to make that a mystery, make a mystery out of the fact that the reservoirs are being emptied. I thought, it's something you can follow through the city, just like you can follow this dried LA riverbed, and a man drowns in a riverbed that's dry. How the hell did that happen? And I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a detective movie out of that? And so all these pieces came together, and I caught up with Jack and said, listen, I've got an idea. What if I do a detective movie?
It was a series of conversations, I must say. I don't remember them specifically, but he had this idea. All I pretty much said was fine. And Robert liked writing for me as he understood me as an actor in that period and thought this would be good.
I couldn't have conceived or written the character of Gittes without my knowledge of Jack and my friendship with him. We'd roomed together. We'd been in acting class together. I had seen him struggle in anonymity for 15 years, being insulted at the unemployment office by people telling him that maybe he should get a real job. All of those things that, in one way and another, became part of the character of Gittes, the thin-skinned quality, the cynicism, the flashes of anger, all of the things that made Jack unique as an actor and as a person were characteristics that inevitably found their way into the character of Gittes.
You must really think I'm stupid, don't you, Gittes?
I don't think about it that much, but give me a day or two and I'll get back to you.
I got involved with Chinatown on a rainy night back in '71. I was having dinner with Bob Town, who was at that moment a fledgling writer with a good reputation, but money meant nothing to him. He just wanted to write what he wanted to write, and I wanted him to write Gatsby for me. And I offered him at that time, which was an astronomical amount, $175,000 to do it. He said, no, I don't want to try and beat Fitzgerald.
I didn't want to be the unknown Hollywood screenwriter who fucked up a literary classic, because I figured that's what would happen, I mean, you can afford to do that if you have some sort of reputation. But if you have less than none, and you do that, I mean, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was going to make a good movie, and I wanted to do what I was doing.
It's just, I'm writing this story called Chinatown, but it's not about Chinatown. It's a place in your mind, rather. They began telling me about it. Just, let's do that instead.
Robert Evans was not an independent producer. He was the head of the studio. He was the head of production and head of seduction. Bob was good-looking, had a beautiful house. He was the talk of the town in those days.
Robert Evans is a unique individual in every way, and somebody that we all got along with, and somebody who understood all of, we were friends. I mean, Robert Town had his wedding at Evans's house.
Chinatown was my first film as a bonus, because no person ever ran a studio and could make their own films. So instead of giving me a raise, Charlie Bluedorn, who was at that time owned Paramount, he let me have something unprecedented, which is being able to make a film a year and also run the studio. And it worked against me, not for me. If the picture were not a success, it wouldn't have mattered, but the picture being the hit that it was, all the other filmmakers around Paramount said, it's not right, he's working on Chinatown, why isn't he spending time with us in our film? So it reverberated negatively towards me.
I was living in Rome and working there, and I loved it there. And Jack called and said, I don't remember how specific he was about the kind of film, but that's something for us to do together.
We spent a lot of time together, Roman and I. You know, he's one of the great directors. So just based on that, not only the friendship, anybody would really have a strong desire to work with him. And Chinatown is a Roman Clef thriller. Roman's very good and had an already well-established reputation for suspense pictures, even comedy, my favorite, Cul-de-sac. So it was just a kind of natural progression.
I wanted a European's vision, not an American vision of it, because the Europeans see America differently. Then Jack wanted him very much, and I wanted him very much, and he wasn't that anxious at the moment to come back to America.
The subject was exciting. The genre was something that I thought of doing one day, but I wasn't very hot on going back to Hollywood and making a movie there again. But Bob Evans said, come over, we talk about it. I had criticism regarding the script. So I took a trip and we had a meeting to talk about the script. And I remember Bob Town at the time was somehow depressed by all criticism that we had, which mainly was the question of the length.
It was about 180 pages. And so I said, Roman, let me take one more whack at it.
I said, okay, and see you then. And I left. And I thought that it was probably the end of my involvement.
I did a second draft, and I don't know. I think that Roman probably liked the first draft better than the second.
And then I somehow got more involved in it, and Bob Evans said, well, you must, guys, sit down now and really put it into the shootable shape.
Before we started work, he said, I have a present for you. And he gave me a book. It was How to Write a Screenplay. And he signed it to my dear partner with hope, Roman. I would go to his house every day with Hira, and we worked for 6 weeks there, and had dinner at night, and would fight during the day.
We were working in tremendous heat. There was a real heat wave in California then. But we'd sit down in a small room with Bob on the opposite side of the desk, with dog lying on my feet and Bob smoking his pipe nonstop. I was in a kind of daze throughout this work.
He did a one-line version of each scene. And he took his scissors and cut the pieces up, and we scotch taped them onto the door of the room. And then we just moved these pieces around to see what pattern would emerge that would get us through the story with the most clarity and the most dramatic drive.
But we had two places where we were not together. One was the ending, and the other one was the scene when they have their love encounter. I was convinced that they should make love together, that they should be bound by some kind of very intimate situation. And Bob didn't think so.
I don't remember that. I thought they should become involved. I remember plenty of other disagreements, but that I don't remember.
And also I thought that the girl should die at the end if you want the film to have an impact.
The ending I do remember. The original ending that I had written, Faye had killed her father because of the daughter, but couldn't talk about it. And Gittes knew about it and couldn't talk about it, so she was going to go to jail and possibly suffer the extreme consequences. It was not a happy ending. but it was a more complex ending. And I felt that the ending that Roman wanted was too nakedly melodramatic and we couldn't get away with it.
And so we could not agree on this, and finally, since the time was running and we had to start and Bob Evans was pushing, I decided to go ahead and I promised that I'll come up with these two scenes later. So we started shooting, and somewhere like 3/4 to the film or even later, Bob Evans started getting very anxious about those missing scenes, because I must say I was postponing and a bit procrastinating, but finally I had to deal with it. And I wanted absolutely to have a scene in Chinatown, and I thought that the end would be good in Chinatown.
In the original script, there was none. There was no scene in Chinatown. I was worried about putting a scene there.
I thought that some action should take place in Chinatown to somehow justify the title. And we ended up by doing it, but at the very, very end. I asked Dick Silbert to just fix a street so it looks like a Chinatown street. So Dick did, but it was really getting critical by that time.
There were elements of the ending that was not completely written. There was about a half a page of dialogue. From the time that Perry Lopez says, "Loach, lock him to the wheel of the car," there's about a half a page there that wasn't written. The action was written. I mean, the killing, her death. It was a transitional piece in there that wasn't written.
So I wanted Jack Nicholson to really fashion it his way. And we were already on the location. He was in his trailer when I walked in his trailer and gave him this and I said, "Jack, why don't you just deal with his lines?" And he did it in half an hour or something like that. And we shot it. Of course, the production knew already what the situation is going to be and what action is going to be. But I was not yet locked up with the dialogue, and that really happened in the last hours.
Gotta call a captain. Get an ambulance.
And Roman, he was right. I think he was right because a story with that degree of complexity needed the clarity and the simplicity of the ending that he saw. And I'm very glad that he was there and he prevailed because he was right.
No, that's how it is in life very often, that the culprit survives. And if you want to have a reaction of the viewer, if you want people to think about what they thought and think that justice should prevail, that you have to give them something they can think about. If everything is wrapped up and a happy ending occurs just because the merchandising people prefer it, the audience leaves and forget about the problem right over the dinner.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. I wrote it down. I remember we talked about it for a while. I mean, that was one of the things that we were looking for a way to use it in the course of the movie, and it just ended up in the end, you know.
Bob has a great ear for the dialogue. I mean, really every line is interesting and right. You know, it's not an invented sort of stuff that we hear in most of Hollywood pictures.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Beautiful.
Chinatown was done in the atmosphere of joy. Bob Evans was terrific. You know, he would let me do whatever I wanted. There were no restrictions. I didn't have to waste energy on discussions with the executives and explanations, justifications. It was just you know, getting in the car in the morning, going on location or driving to the studio. I remember one of the first moments, I think it was the first day of shooting, Bob had a terrible back. He was literally unable to move. And for some reason, I had back pain as well.
We drove out to the location in the back of a station wagon, both lying on our back. It's a hell of a way to start.
Chinatown happens all over Los Angeles, so we could not shoot the entire film in the studio like they used to do it in the 30s. But I must say that Bob Town was very helpful, because writing the script, he had already done his homework and knew all places that he was describing. So he indicated us where he had imagined various scenes. And Dick Silbert, although a New Yorker, he knew Hollywood and Los Angeles very well. So we found those places quite quickly, but every interior is built in a studio. I think that he was one of the best production designers that Hollywood ever had.
Duffy. Hey, Walsh!
I would say Chinatown was one of the biggest learning experiences that I had early on in my, well, not so early, but at the beginning of the successful portion of my job. Anthea taught me a lot about style and clothes and all the things that a wardrobe person, and had a very integrated point of view about the picture as a whole.
Is a film about a certain period, and what has to be precise, exact, is the sets, the atmosphere, the way the people dress naturally. And I remembered those days. I was a little child, and I remembered my mother doing certain things like plucking her eyebrows and then drawing very thin line, putting her lipstick in a sort of Cupid bow shape, and the powder and the style of the period. I remember those details, and I wanted to recreate this style, but I did not want any stylization. And here, points of view varied with the whole studio, namely with Bob Evans. Bob couldn't understand why I want to shoot on Panavision. He would like the film to be stylized like the Godfather was, as far as the color was concerned, you know, that sort of brownish, reddish tint. I didn't think that it was necessary. As a film, the style that I wanted to give it was Raymond Chandler's style, when he writes his story in first person. Therefore, I wanted to tell this film subjectively. And one thing on which I was insisting during the work with Bob Town was that there should not be scenes which are without guitars.
One of the techniques that he used, that I also used in the second picture, when I was the director of Two Jakes, was you shoot from behind the detective, so that the story is coming at the audience really a lot more than normally through his point of view.
Stanley Cortez was the first DP. He was very much the old-fashioned, old-style DP, and his lighting gave this sort of 40s, 30s look to the film, this Technicolor look. I was not particularly upset with it, but Bob Evans was very much. Besides, he took tremendous amount of time to light a scene. So Bob asked me to look for another director of photography quick, because it had to be done within a day or two. So I looked at the films of people who were available at that time, and I thought that John Alonso was someone that we should try. I must say that Dick Silbert would help me very much in all these decisions. As far as framing is concerned, it's me. One thing that I really am very particular about is the framing. I leave completely free hand to the director of photography as far as lighting is concerned. I listen with interest to his proposals, ideas, etc. But the framing, it's my movie. I have it in my mind more or less before, and it becomes concrete after the rehearsal on the set, and that's the way I want to see it.
Why did you leave the police force?
As the story tells it, he was a regular police officer and apparently was dismissed or had to resign from duty because of getting too personally involved with the case in Chinatown. That gives the backstory its kind of resonance, and the idea that in Chinatown you think you know what's going on, but you don't. Mystery. You know, that's what that character had and what Chinatown was sort of meant to represent as a metaphor.
I want to know more about you.
Not now.
It was written for Jack. In fact, Gittes is a friend of Jack's. Harry Gittes is a friend of Jack's.
I just love the name Gittes for a pushy private detective. And it's a name that just, it's fun to say, Gittes. And then Huston genuinely mispronounced it, and that was kept.
You've got a nasty reputation, Mr. Gittes. I like that.
It was just a name that suggested a kind of pushy, kind of bedroom peeper, a hustler. And I love the name.
Isn't that your phone number?
Is it? I forget. I don't call myself that often.
The humor in it is Jack. The lines are written by Bob Town, and sometimes they're very funny, but the way they're read, it's Jack. I didn't have much rehearsal. You know, we rehearsed on the set a few minutes before the shoot.
Roman taught me a lot of things about acting in a movie. I remember him having a discussion with him about how you have to act with a car. You don't just drive it. You know, you have to think about what's really going on and drive the car graphically accordingly. Then I had a lot of problems early on with everyone felt I talked strangely, but particularly slowly. And I always felt the subliminal attack in terms of, can't we kind of speed it up, Jack? And Roman was the first person who gave me a very undeniable reason for speaking faster than I might normally in this particular picture because of the amount of dialogue and the amount of plot that had to be expressed in the dialogue, and that if I talked and took my normal rhythms, the movie would be 7 hours long or something. So I didn't have any problems adjusting to that particular direction.
Look, somebody's gone to a lot of trouble here, and lawsuit or no lawsuit, I intend to find out. I'm not supposed to be the one who's caught with his pants down.
When he's washed down by the spur of water, well, I wanted him to do it, and I wanted to end with him near the camera, so he would be washed towards the camera. And Jack was game for this type of things, but just before we rolled, he was showing me something like this, and at first I didn't know whether he was showing me the finger. I said, what? What now? He says, 1. I said, what 1? 1 take only. And we did 1 take only, of course.
Hold it there, kitty cat. Hold it.
We definitely spoke about Roman playing the part of the guy who slits his nose. It just seemed perfect, you know.
You know what happens to nosy fellows? Huh? No?
I just thought it was the perfect thing to do to a nosy guy, to slit his nostril. And it seemed awful to me at the time, and I guess it did to everybody else too. It's suggestive of something horrible.
He wanted to relax as an actor that night and asked me if I had any tips. And I said, well, you know, people know when you're on edge, Roman, and nervous. Why don't you go out on the set the first time and forget to put on your pants? Which he did. And, you know, anything that works for an actor. It's a good actor.
I was not very keen on doing it. In those days, my long hair meant a lot to me, and I didn't want to cut it. I kept it until the very last moment, and literally before the scene, they cut my hair off. And then they came up, the special effect people with all kind of idea of making him a funny nostrils. I knew it wouldn't work. I know that illusions, the most important thing is that things should happen quick. So I asked for the tip of the knife to be swiveling.
It had a flange on the tip so that, you know, when it went like that, you wouldn't see it give and then snap back. And of course, it would only be hinged one way or it wouldn't work.
I had that with blood, and I just had to spurt it in the right moment. And the combination of two of the gives this shocking effect. But the knife could swivel only in one direction. So I realized it, and I said, Jack, you know, I must hold it the right way, otherwise I cut your nostril for real. So please remind me, because it's more important for you than it's for me. And before each take, it had, Roman, the knife. You know, I would check it.
The slit nose was a lesson in itself, you know, the different stages. He's very scientific about these things. You know, the gluing on of stitches, what was under there at any given time, you know. And, of course, as a method actor, I used it to the best of my abilities.
And Roman had the great good sense and the will to say, you know, let's play this out as it would happen with a guy with a bunch of stitches in his nose. He's going to have a bandage on it, and it's going to be there for half the movie.
I doubt whether you could get away with it today when you have a committee sending you notes, which they call the creative group notes, you know, or whatever. You know, to cover the star of the film with a bandage, how can you do it? Of course, it's an idiocy to think this way. Jack was enthused about this idea, and everybody else, and it worked.
I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it. And I still think that you're hiding something.
He's very, very meticulous, but free at the same time. I mean, we had some good times and we had some good arguments. We had some real good arguments, actually.
We were shooting the scene in the office in the water department, and I wanted to have the effect of light through the Venetian blinds, and it was very difficult to set up. It took a long time. And that night there was an important game going on television, Lakers versus I don't remember. And I could feel Jack really anxious to go back to his television set.
Yes, there was a basketball game on at the time, which I have to tell people, look, I'm a very cold professional. I don't let something like basketball interfere with my job. But people don't believe it anyway. And what I knew was we weren't going to get this shot before we wrapped. We did a few takes, you know, there was some, you know, I'm sort of like this. Pretty much I'm not the only one now who figures we're not going to get this shot before wrap.
And I said, all right, that's a wrap. And Jack went, that's a wrap, and he wrapped that Venetian blind that took me I don't know, half an hour to set so I had the right light on him.
Now, he took off, and I thought, oh, this is going to be good.
I went crazy and ran into his trailer, which was right next to us.
As he ran up, on the way, he picked up this kind of cumbersome scoop that the man used to keep the stage clean. And I got around in time to see him, you know, try to swing this thing inside this small dressing room at the television set.
And I was imagining a fantastic implosion and noise and all, and the damn thing didn't break, you know? So furious, I grabbed this portable set, and I could see how he caught the first assistant director, you know, going like this. I didn't know it was his set. And I threw it out of that trailer, and it still didn't break. And I think the Lakers were still on, but Jack was by then pissed off and started ripping his costume.
I don't remember exactly why, but I started tearing my wardrobe off and was left at the end of the argument in my underwear alone and left the set, not knowing that, of course, I had to come back in because my dressing room was on the set. I had to come back in, kind of silly, feeling a little bit nutty.
Then I went to the parking and drove home, and suddenly I realized that next to me was Jack's old Volkswagen Beetle, you know, with a loud music, and I turned and he's sitting next to me.
I looked over and there he sat, smiling at me like this. We got out at the intersection. It was at night already, and we just stood there and laughed. You know, this was nothing to us. Of course, the poor people who'd witnessed this thought, oh my God, is this the end, or will we ever get these two people back together again? But we were already, it was Friday, I remember, because we sort of were laughing because we knew they'd be stewing on this over the weekend. So that was one argument we had.
Tell me, Mr. Gittes, does this often happen to you?
Faye was able to suggest a sense of someone who was damaged in some way, but her poise seemed powerful. And the traditional role of the female in detective movies is always something of a black widow. So it comes as kind of a shock that she's the victim.
At that time, Faye's career wasn't at its height. She had made a lot of films that didn't come off quite the way she wanted. In this film, it was the best investment she ever made because she was extraordinary, and I don't think anyone could have played it as well.
I think there's been some misunderstanding here. There's no point in getting tough with me. I
don't get tough with anyone, Mr. Gittes. My lawyer does.
I knew her slightly, not too well prior to the movie. She, of course, had done Bonnie and Clyde with my friend Warren, also a member of this particular social circle. She's a wonderful actor, and I was delighted that she was going to be in the picture.
She was good for the part. She had a quality for a femme fatale. So I knew Faye, but I never worked with her, and sometimes it was very tough.
Faye took a long time between shots. Roman didn't think it was necessary. She did. That's, of course, her prerogative to reset her makeup. You know, she wanted to be sure of how she looked because it was very specific. Roman, as any director would at times, would go mad with the waiting.
And then came the famous story of the hair, which became a kind of a symbolic of our relationship. What happened was that we were shooting a scene in Brown Derby, and she was, I think it was an over-shoulder shot with a backlight showing one hair sticking out. To a layman, it means nothing, but to us, it's something that would be visible on the camera in the close-up. You know, it just didn't look good. So I cut and asked the hairdresser to get rid of it. So he came and brushed and put it back, and we roll again, and the hair sticks out again. So I cut again. And the hairdresser comes again, and we roll again, and the hair comes out again. And finally, I come up, I say, wait, Faye, and pluck the hair out. She went insane and started screaming and shouting and invectives and you name it. And I said, okay, well, that's a wrap. I don't remember how the whole thing was patched up. Of course, soon it was forgotten.
When there's grit and fighting on a set and arguing and this is the way I want it and this is the way it's going to be, I loved that. Do you know why? It's only through irreverence can you possibly touch a bit of magic. When you're too reverent to something, it invariably turn out underwhelming.
Looking back on those things, you know, I mean, it just seemed like regular stuff, you know, I mean, Faye, she could be a handful, no doubt about that, but so can he, so can I, so could we all.
And Roman got things out of Faye that we hadn't gotten out of it before or since.
Who cares whether it was a her or a fight with Faye? The result is important, and she did a fantastic work in this film. And I think that among other movies that Faye did, this is probably, if not the top, one of the best.
She's my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
As Roman rightly says, I don't think anybody believes anything in a movie if it's information that's freely given, particularly information like that. It has to be beaten out of somebody before you believe the validity of it. And so that was the basis for making that scene work.
And when we came to shoot it, Roman didn't feel that the first take or so, that I was getting enough zip into the slapping. And Faye agreed with him and said, just go ahead and slap me. You know, don't fake it, give me a slap, which isn't usually necessary. And I don't remember if I did actually slap her or not, but I know it gave me, I was less, you know, tentative about the slapping in the scene.
My sister, my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister and my daughter.
Usually casting is terribly subjective. Everybody has their own opinion. When it got to John Huston, we all wanted John Huston, just like we all wanted Jack.
How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future.
Physically, I thought he was great type for this role. So that's how I asked him, and he wanted to do it, so we were delighted. And on the set, we talked not so much about his films as about life in general.
Well, I worked with him as a director after this. He's pretty consistent, a no-nonsense kind of guy. I saw an interview where he said, you know, I don't know what to say about the style of my work. I'd be very self-conscious about it if I thought I had something resembling a style. So he was pretty, you know, he's like the final exponent of the studio system, actually, the most advanced one at the transition period around the time of the New Wave, or earlier with Orson Welles, who brought the director on screen.
You may think you know what you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't.
The cast, you know, from Jack and Faye and John Huston to Perry Lopez, and I remember being struck by John Hellerman when I first saw him. I thought he was so right for this local bureaucrat. And Diane Ladd, Burt Young, I mean, James Hong, they were all so right down to the Mexican boy on the sway-backed horse. I couldn't imagine other people playing those parts.
I was surprised by the quality of the performance, because I have not seen the film for years, and then I ran it quite recently because I knew that you were going to ask me about it, and I didn't want to seem like a dumbbell. So I must admit I did have a look at it, and I was, well, not surprised, satisfied to rediscover that those people did a very good job. I didn't think there was anything special about it, truly. I wasn't very keen on returning to Los Angeles. I didn't want to work there. To be honest, it was for me a job, more than the work of passion or heart. But maybe that helped us all to be somehow cool about it.
I thought it could have been a failure because it's a kind of film that you have to pay attention to. If you went out to take a piss, you come back and you lose the storyline. And it's a very intelligent screenplay. And the characters are very 3, 4, 5, 6 dimensional.
We wouldn't have started to make just any old detective picture. So we had that sense all along. I think we all felt we did a good job. I think we all had a lot of belief in Roman's abilities to articulate a movie, and so we thought it might be, good.
What can I tell you, kid? You're right. When you're right, you're right. And you're right. So what do you got?
I do recall sneak preview very well. It was in Santa Barbara, and I invited Bronislaw Kaper. Brony Kaper was a famous composer. In those years, I never had somehow opportunity to work with him, but when I first came to Hollywood with my first picture, I met Brony Kaper, and he took me around Hollywood. He knew everybody. He was really the old-timer, and he knew all old-timers. So after the screening in Santa Barbara, Bob Evans turned to Kaper and says, "Brony, what do you think?" And he says, "A great movie, but you have to change the music." And I must say that I agreed as well. The reason was practically all my films, or rather the music for all my films, was composed, scored by Krzysztof Komeda, the Polish composer. I brought him to Hollywood for Rosemary's Baby, but due to some accident, Komeda died a couple of years before Chinatown. And I really didn't know where to turn. And when this guy sent me this music, I liked it, and we hired him. But already during the scoring of this music, I realized that it's not what we were expecting. Now we're sitting in Santa Barbara with Brony Kaper, the rest of the band, around some drinks, and Bob Evans says, we're going to change the music, we're going to change. He said there were dates already for the release of the film.
Scoring is very important. Jerry Goldsmith came in and wrote a score in 9 days. And the score with just a single trumpet sound. And it was a great help to the film.
It's an essential component of the film. I mean, it's hard to imagine that movie without the Goldsmith score, isn't it?
And then came another snag. I was directing an opera in Spoleto, in the Festival of Spoleto. And I had to leave like within a week. I just could not stay anymore in Los Angeles. Bob Evans promised me that he's going to take care of it personally, and to his credit, I must say, he did pretty well. I was not in Hollywood when they scored the film. I heard the music when it was all placed by Sam Osteen and the music editor.
The picture opened in the summertime, and in those days, they used to have drive-in theaters, and it was not a good drive-in movie. So I didn't know whether the film would do well. The people at the studio didn't think it would. They thought it was too intellectual. It really isn't intellectual, but it was very strong. We went to the theater after theater. People would walk out, total silence. When that happens, you don't know whether it's very bad, which it could be, or very good. We showed it at the Directors Guild, and the first person to walk out shook his head at me. "Too bad, Bob, too bad." But I knew we had a hit when we went to one preview, and a lady came over to me, well, she must have been in her 70s, and put her finger up at me and said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Then I thought, hey, we got a hit here.
You sure this is okay?
Curly, do you know how long I've been in this business?
The reviews broke the next day, and I hadn't had a film, I still haven't had a film of any of my films, or uniformly got stronger or more powerful reviews of a film, and they re-reviewed it and re-reviewed it and reanalyzed it and editorialized on it, and it built its own cult.
It was surreal. It just, because one review after another came in, it was stunning. We kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. We couldn't believe it because the reaction was so overwhelming.
What was important for the studio and for us was the public success of the film. And since that was functioning, everybody was happy. We did not know right away that the film was going to be nominated. We were hoping for it.
I told Evans that I felt that we would get really a lot of Academy Award nominations, but that we wouldn't win many. Why I thought this at the time, I don't know. I just felt it.
And we were the odds-on favorite going in to win. We won all the other awards, the Golden Globe Awards, everything leading up to it. And we were nominated for 11 Academy Awards in Chinatown. We only won one. Bobtown won as Best Screenplay.
You know, Robert Towne actually kind of hid the only Oscar that we won because we were all in the car under his leg self-consciously because we only won the one Oscar for the script.
Yes. I was embarrassed. I mean, I felt terrible. And because I thought Jack, for sure, would have won. I couldn't believe it.
Bob Evans was convinced that the film was going to win Oscars, but I didn't want to come to the ceremony. I rather went to Japan for the opening of the picture there.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
It became classic with time. I'll quote you a line from the picture: the old whores and houses become respectable with time.
This business requires a certain amount of finesse.
You know, you're not trying to make a classic, but you hope that the movie will have some afterlife and that, and you approach almost all movies that way, and this is a case where it seems we succeeded.
I saw the film Jack and I did about 2 years ago, and I was struck that the film could have been shot yesterday. It had not aged a bit. It had aged less than any film that I can ever remember working on.
I haven't seen a film in the genre as good in my career. And I tried to make some, and they certainly didn't turn out as good. It was a moment in time, and suddenly it just fit together, and it started at magic. It started at sparks.
I think my best work is The Pianist. I think if I were asked what cans of which movies do I want to deposited on my tomb, I would say The Pianist. But next probably Chinatown, yeah.
It's an innocent question.
No question from you is innocent, Mr. Gittes.
Well, that was really smart.
Only when I breathe.
I think you know all you need know about me.
Most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Dave!